Welcome to Inside the Numbers, the RockDaisy Sports Performance Podcast, where we decode the data, science, and stories powering elite athlete development. I'm Ron McKeefrey, and in every episode, I'll be diving deep with top strength conditioning coaches, sports scientists, and performance experts who are driving the game forward using tech, insight, and grit. Hey guys, welcome back to Inside the Numbers, powered by RockDaisy. Super excited about this episode. We got James Perez down from assistant director down at the University of Arizona. We've missed each other at Fresno State, but a guy that I've heard quite a great things about, and I know he's doing great things down there in Arizona. So, man, appreciate you being on the show.
Yeah, appreciate you having me.
Jay, you've been Stanford, San Jose State, Fresno State, down at Arizona. I'm sure there's some other places in there as well, but like, which one of those stops really kind of developed you or this passion for sports science?
I would have to say Stanford to start. We didn't have a lot of tech down there when I got there originally in 2017. No force plates, no GPS, no NORD boards. Our VBT was still the good old Tendo units with the strings. That was an absolute hassle to work with. Still love those things. They're tried and true, but that's kind of what you're dealing with on a weekly basis doing that. And so when our director at that time, Colin Carroll, took over, I think that was a big piece of his initiative and our staff's initiative to get something rolling there. There's just too much low-hanging fruit. And knowing that week in and week out, we're competing against a lot of programs that have that tool, lit a fire under us. Sam Contorno, who's the sports scientist at the University of Texas now, was with us as a strength coach. And we kind of said, hey, here are the keys, build this thing out. And she did a phenomenal job getting us off the ground and just really opened our eyes to the different metrics and different questions I think that you can answer. Is our program working? Are we getting the most performance development out of our guys? How does this help us from an injury prevention standpoint? And so just thinking globally like that, where we literally got all this stuff in cardboard boxes and opened it up for the first time. We're making calls in our network daily and weekly to get some more insights on how this tech works and how people are using it. I mean, most people that are using tech understand how many different metrics that you could actually collect. I think it just brings a lot of noise into the equation and you can get lost in the sauce, so to speak. So trying to drill down on what key metrics and what different trends that you're trying to keep track of, I think really make it a really unique and advantageous tool. Like I said, from a development standpoint, but also injury prevention.
Yeah, I couldn't agree anymore. It's funny. It's one of those things when you're looking at jobs or you think about places, right? You think like the military academies, you think discipline, you think Stanford or Harvard or somewhere like that. You think intelligence and high tech and, cutting edge and all that. And it's refreshing to hear that it wasn't quite that way, but you obviously guys took that big step. And I agree, having worked with Andy Ward yourself, I haven't worked with you, but through him and you just, that Stanford tree, with Sam and others is very, very, very good. We had AJ Middleton. I don't know if AJ crossed paths with you as well, but
he was there with us in 21, and then
just a good group, good group doing things right. You mentioned a couple things in there that I want to kind of drill down on, and I think when you talk performance, so you talk performance and injury prevention, right? I think those are two main areas that there's a difference between tech and sports science. There's a lot of places with tech, but how they use it and implement it, that's the key. I know you guys are doing a great job of implementing this in those two areas. When you talk performance and kind of individualization, which is where I really think that's highlighted, what are some of the things you're doing at Arizona to kind of individualize programs using sports science and technology?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think first and foremost, I think speed has become a major, not just a buzzword in collegiate and NFL S&C, or at least on the football side of things, but I think that's become more of the king in people's programs and what you're doing on field. I know certainly for us philosophically, earlier in my career, it was the weight room, and you do what you have to on the field. Now I think it's completely inverted. I think we're really putting more stock in what we're doing on the field more so and having the weight room complement that. So with that being said, we purchased 4 at the beginning of the year and have started individualizing our training with that. Isaac Franco, who's an assistant on our staff, came to us from Les Spellman. He worked with him for a year and then was with the New York Jets and had a lot of experience with the 1080. Through our little experience with it, research on it and whatnot, we're like, this is a tool that could help us. And so from just in that piece of technology, being able to individualize our sprint training for 105 guys on the roster is huge. We also, in tandem, we use the force plate technology to kind of identify, looking at different metrics, okay, who are really good accelerators, who are guys that are more leaning towards a max velocity or top end speed, and then who are our tweeners, who are the guys that are on the bubble either way. And for us, it's like, okay, well, if we can start to bucket these guys a little bit, and usually in the off season, Mondays and Thursdays are our acceleration and our max velocity days outside. And so we'll curtail that training on an individual basis just from a resistance standpoint, distance standpoint. When they get their dose of the sprint training that day, it's individualized to Ron McKeefery's needs, to James Perez's needs. And so we felt like we've really moved the needle in that way and seen a lot of good results from that as one aspect in the performance world that we're using with our sports science.
Yeah, I think speed, obviously, or doing the same thing with VBT in the weight room, which I know you guys do as well. You mentioned Nintendo's. To me, that's the biggest differentiator is being able to really show the athletes, still keeping it in a group setting, but how they can individualize it within the individual rep, the individual set, or the individual sprint, like you mentioned. I know some of that tech carries over into the return to play or the injury prevention side of things. We've done quite a bit of work with the 1080 and especially with agility and return to play and getting some baselines there. But what are you guys doing from an injury prevention to really kind of utilize all this tech suite that you have?
Yeah, I mean, shoot, a ton. I think just broad strokes here with the Catapult GPS, we know who they are objectively when they're healthy. So helping us come up with their return to play calendar and what certain benchmarks we need to see, we can objectively make those decisions day to day on is this progress good enough, or do we need to stay in this phase of rehab a little bit longer? Our training staff here is outstanding. They use force frames and force plates, Nord boards, and they're doing constant assessments. And so we use a high performance model here with our ATs, our sports nutrition, and our S&C staff. And so we meet 1 to 2 times weekly and go through our injury report, and everyone sort of contributes and brings to the table some objective data that's helping us guide our day-to-day plan with these return to play athletes. The 1080 is super useful from a just training and drilling standpoint, to adding those VDECs on there to slow the athlete down, especially if they're in a soft tissue situation where we don't want them to get to a speed that's a little bit risky at that phase in their rehab. We can throw on a decrement, slow them down, and really still work on developing some of their technique, right? To maybe avoid some of the things that potentially set them up for the injury that they sustained in the first place. That's like a moving force plate, right? So we can look at asymmetries in their strides. The force plate, we test our guys once a week on the force plate. And so we can see trends. What's their nervous system looking like? What are those asymmetries for some of our guys that are coming back or battling something? They're still on the field, still participating in practice, but we know they've had some lingering issues. And then you mentioned it in season for us, especially, I'm a warmonger when it comes to that VBT and using our elite form system. I think, this might be a hot take, but I think you're out of your mind if you're not using that on a daily basis with the barbell lifting that you're doing in your program. It's just so easy for us to see on an individual basis. If I need to hit this phase of speed, whether it's accelerative strength or strength speed, and a kid's not in it, I'm not going to force that kid to stay at that percentage that's potentially going to drive him further into fatigue. Right? I can peel some weight off to keep him in that zone and make sure that his performance and his outputs are where they need to be for what he walked into the room with that day. Right. And he might have been coming off of a 2.5 hour practice, which is when we lift our travel guys are immediately after Tuesday practices. He might have played an 80 plus snaps on Saturday and he's just beat up. Right. That 65 or that 75%, whatever percent you've got on the bar might feel like 85, 90 to that kid that day.
Yeah.
And so we want to meet them where they're at. On the other side of that, if a kid's stroking it and feeling really good and he's had some good recovery and we can move the needle a little bit and sneak some development in at that time, we're not going to hold him back either. So I think that's really come at a high price for us, high value, I should say. And we use that on a frequent basis. And then what's really cool is, especially with Elite Form, all that data gets sent to the cloud for us. So at least for me, I'm directly in charge of our Catapult GPS data and our Elite Form VBT. And so I can start to see trends and correlations and stuff with what we're seeing outside, what we're seeing in here, and kind of make some decisions or some suggestions otherwise.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what you were saying with, I think old school mentality is, technology is trying to get you out of something. But the reality is that when used appropriately, it can do the opposite. It can have you push more, or, just because you have to drop the weight doesn't mean that you can't add more volume some type of way. But having that knowledge in the moment instead of after the lift and having to kind of post-mortem that, that's the ability when you're able to make those decisions quickly because you're seeing it first, in hand.
100%.
But being able to measure things like asymmetries and muscular imbalances and truly know what's going on without just trying to eyeball it or guess makes a big difference. You mentioned, your performance team and coaches and athletes, in recruiting. How are you presenting this information to your athletes? When you've got a force velocity curve, you've got force plate data, you've got GPS data. Like, how are you communicating this to your coaches, to recruits when they come in and present that kind of information?
Yeah. So from an athlete standpoint, I think that's where you have to start, just because they're day to day for 14 hours a day. They're getting poked and prodded. It's their full-time job and then some, right? They're in meetings watching film. They're required at meals. They're required, in practice. And if they're on the injury list, they have to go get treatment. Coach Brennan's huge on using the AT room and just wearing them out. And so we have a lot of guys that are on the prevention side that are going in there to get a lot of recovery work and whatnot. So that's more or less the standard. And then when you start adding in some specific objectives and data to really show them, hey, you are improving, or hey, whatever treatment you're doing with the ATs is working, or we get major buy-in when, at the end of every practice, after I'm done cleaning and downloading the GPS reports, I put out a 10 to 15 athlete, I call it the hot list. And these are guys that just have high neuromuscular load, high mechanical load. When you're looking at the A cells and D cells, maybe some upper echelon of high speed yardage, they tapped into 85 or 90% plus a bunch of times. And from a data perspective, they just look shot to me. And then I'll go and check in with DeMonte Hagler, who's an assistant on our staff that runs our force plate data, and say, hey, are you seeing, Ron's been showing X, Y, and Z. Does that line up for what you saw today from his jumps or yesterday from his jumps? Oh, yeah, it does. So then I'll take that 10 to 15 athlete list and shoot it over to our athletic trainers. And then they take on the responsibility of putting all these athletes on a targeted recovery protocol based on where they're hot. So if a guy has a ton of A cells and D cells, he had a lot of explosive movements that day, right? We need to get him in the tubs. We need to do some contrast, get those joints moving again, make him feel good. And so circling back to the buy-in and education piece with the athletes, just being able to show them or identify, hey, you were on the hot list today. They feel like they're getting taken care of. They feel like we're monitoring the data that we are collecting from them is being used to their advantage. Some fun stuff we'll do with the force plate, especially in the off season, not so much in season, but we'll put the metrics and leaderboards up on our TVs in the weight room. And so you'll have those top jumpers of the day, and guys will try and sneak in more jumps, right? If we only need 3 counter movement jumps from you today, some guys will try and sneak in if they're 5th on the board or 3rd on the board just to try and get that top spot. So that, it's fun because that data can definitely drive competitive edge as well. And we want to keep that edge sharp as frequently as possible.
Yeah.
From a coaching standpoint, right, I'm taking that report. I get a physical report to Coach Brennan, some physical reports to our coordinators, and then I send out an electronic copy with like 4 to 6 bullet points of just my take on what practice looked like, how it compared to others, what trends we're seeing, who's on our hot list. And then those just organically start really good conversations with the position coaches upstairs. Hey, can we manipulate practice tomorrow for so-and-so if need be? Try and stay out of that as much as possible. Football's football, and I'm not going to pretend to be an expert. tactically of what needs to happen and what development needs to go down upstairs. But we do want to keep them out of harm's way because, as you know, Coach, if we see a slew of injuries start to go down, where's the bullseye going? It's coming downstairs.
No doubt.
So we got to be able to kind of in a common interest way cover our ass and be able to take care of our guys at the same time. What the ultimate goal for everybody is winning on Saturday. So whatever that takes, we're all rowing in the same direction.
Yeah, that being able to communicate that information is the paramount piece to me, right? Because that education, that buy-in, that starts that kind of accountability process. Sometimes, you mentioned a little bit about the recovery. I was going to kind of take it in that being an area that a lot of people doesn't put a lot of effort into. I know you guys do, but when athletes don't want to do that, they don't want to be picked and prodded and wear their GPS vest or do their recovery. Like, what are some of the creative things that you guys have done to create that buy-in and then if there isn't buy-in, what you're doing from an accountability standpoint?
Yeah. It's a great question. I think we haven't had too many issues with that. Coach Brennan has a saying that we've really hammered in starting in training camp is, what is our edge? And our edge is the unrequired, the in between, and how are you doing that on a daily basis and being more process oriented than outcome oriented. Us as a program, we are in that business of winning games Sunday through Friday, and that's something that we hammer home. And so Mondays like today, it's a recovery day. We have a voluntary regeneration session. The training room's open. The coaches are here if they want to get in some extra film and whatnot with their guys. And so that buy-in piece hasn't been too much of an issue. I think actually guys take a lot of pride if we're tapping them on the shoulder and saying, hey, it'd be a really good idea to go into the training room and hit one of those recovery protocols. You're getting high or you're redlining a little bit and kind of educating them on, hey, here's when we use the hot tubs versus when we use the cold tubs. Here's what the Normatecs do for you or the massage gun. Or, we have a handful of massage therapists that'll come through twice a week in season, Mondays and Thursdays. And so some guys are cool with that. Some guys don't love it. But again, just providing more and more tools that they can use at their disposal. And what's every D1 football athlete's dream is to play at the next level. And I know you have a lot of experience at that level. I've got a lot of friends that work in that level, a lot of former athletes that are up there. You have to be a pro. And it's not just about the paycheck that you're getting paid on a weekly basis. No one is going to force you to do any of those things. The structure is not as intense up there as it is from an individual basis. So if you've got to lift or you've got to practice or you've got to run and you show up 20 minutes, 30 minutes before and you get what those coaches are taking you through and that's it and that's all you need, some stuff starts to creep up on you. You're going to be out of a job. And it's not just, you become second string or third string. You dwindle in the second and third string for long enough and they're just going to cut you. So I think beyond how they're contributing to us, I think giving them those tools that'll help them, at the next level is also a major selling point for them.
Yeah, I think that's the number one thing right there, I think, is if you can communicate to the athletes and educate that they're forming the habits that are going to lead to success on the college field, but also what's going to keep them in the league and keep them having a job after the fact when they don't have to do those things. You've won the battle at that point. If
no
you
doubt.
can do that.
No doubt. And throwing the sports science piece, like we were talking about earlier, showing them the data, like every NFL team has what they need and the tools they need at their disposal to be able to push a high level product every Sunday. So you better believe they've got GPS, force plates, all this stuff that we've got, right? So from a recruiting standpoint, before they get here, huge selling piece. But while they're here, it's like, hey, we're running this as close to an NFL model as we can. And this is going to be a huge advantage for you if you can buy into it. So if guys are forgetting to grab their unit, if we're doing a run, there's an accountability piece to that. If you don't go and jump on the force plate, there's an accountability piece for that. And we don't have a lot of issues like that.
Yeah.
I would say across the board. It comes up in other areas, in the day-to-day, showing up to meals on time, meetings on time, whatnot.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Time
That's
management.
just part of the deal. Yeah. I feel really blessed that we've got the crew that we have here, the roster that we've had, the staff that's bought in. It definitely works to our advantage down here in the weight room.
Yeah. I think that's across the board now with a lot of these college athletes specifically is they have a pretty good understanding that they need to be doing these things. Now there's the time management piece that often is the issue. And as a strength coach, I always felt like that was part of my role too. Part of my role is teaching these kids habits that are going to make them better people, is not just and be involved in the other 22 hours that they're not in the weight room.
Absolutely.
I want to shift gears, here. Last couple questions. You mentioned like your first round at Stanford, there really wasn't much tech, and you've had to kind of self-educate yourself, through this career. It's becoming more prevalent, but for the coach that wants to get into sports science, that is wanting to take those next steps, what advice do you have for them to hit the ground running here and develop a good knowledge base?
Yeah, I'm going to steal one from Sam Contorno because I think she's one of the best doing it right now. Is you have to figure out what question you're trying to answer. What are you trying to figure out? What's the problem that you're trying to solve? Because like we talked about earlier, you can, I mean, some places can, again, it's resource intensive. So if you can't afford all these things, that doesn't mean that you should just press play and buy all of these things.
Right.
Because that collecting data just to collect data, you're becoming a button pusher, and A, that's not what I wanted for myself in this career at all. But B, you can get lost in the noise of all that data that you're collecting, and it just becomes this monotonous deal. And your administration and your coaching staff are wondering, well, hey, why are we spending 50 grand a year doing all this stuff? I haven't seen an actionable, printable use of this data. Well, then you're going to start losing your investors. And so it can be a waste of time and sort of the dog chasing its tail a little bit. So number one, figure out why you want it. What questions are you going to, and problems are you going to solve? And how does that help us? A quick example for us, the GPS as one of our tools shows us what football is. So from a data standpoint, it's not, and I don't mean that we should abandon our coaching eye and our experience and, man, that practice looked tough. And even though the data says it wasn't, like I'm looking at these guys limping off the field, more times than not, it correlates, but it shows us what it is. So from a off-season planning standpoint, from a undulation in training camp and in-season standpoint, we know when we've hit a high day and when we've hit a low day, and we know the importance of keeping that undulation alive. And so, yeah, I think you just really want to figure out, like, what do you want to track, why, and then go from there. Because there's plenty of options of stuff that can be a little bit more resource friendly just to get started. I mean, Catapult has 3 different programs that you can purchase. There's about 4 or 5 other GPS programs that I know of. I know when I was at Fresno State, we just got VX Sport.
Yeah.
And I think Andy's still rocking with them down there. Those guys are great. Love that tech. It's the same thing, right? Like it might come in a different format or whatnot, but wherever your price point is, just start with something and see what you get from it and what you can build off of that. But I think the worst mistake you could make is, all right, well, I've got 50 grand. I'm just going to go spend it on all this stuff. And now you're stretched 6 ways. I love the data, when it comes to the GPS stuff, but I'll tell you what, I get fired up when I'm in my chair for too long, it's not what I signed up for.
That's the more important question right there is, all right, how much work is this going to create for me on the back end? And being efficient, I think that is an important point. Like you said, I think it's knowing that you're going to have all this information, but you said it earlier with being able to clean up the data. That's a real thing with almost every piece of tech that you deal with. You have to go back and clean up the data. That takes time, and that takes knowledge, and that takes a lot of things that aren't associated. It's real easy for a coach to be like, yeah, I saw, Alabama using GPS or Elite Form or whatever. You should go get that. And then you're like, oh man, but Alabama has 15 people, helping with that as opposed to
right. I mean,
Fresno State, we didn't have very many people, right?
Yeah. I mean, tech is sexy, but it is extremely resource expensive.
Right. That's right.
Time and money. It's been really cool for us. I think ideally we'd love a full-time sports scientist to be able to handle all this. Well, we're on the floor, we're at practice, we're on the field, whatever it is, being able to consolidate all that data and do that. But it's been really good for our staff from a professional development standpoint and just across disciplines in the bottom floor of the building, right? From nutrition. I mean, I would consider weigh-ins, a type of sports science, right? We're looking at the data of their body weight fluctuation from day to day. There's so many things that you can draw from that. I've heard in some talks that you've been a part of, I mean, shoot, you don't need lasers if you've got a stopwatch and distance, right? So like there's a bunch of creative things that should be considered sports science, in my opinion.
Great.
And so how far down the rabbit hole do you want to go? Are you equipped to do it? And do you have the resources to be able to manage it at a productive, efficient level, like you mentioned?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think having you have to have the knowledge base. And sometimes that's formed with not having those resources so that you can truly evaluate new tools and be able to decide whether or not that's going to move the needle in your program. I had a coach at South Florida that I would always bring him the latest piece of equipment, the latest tech, whatever. And he'd always be his number one question was, how's this going to win us football games? And if I couldn't answer that question, then we didn't get it, and
get it out. Yeah, cut it.
And it was something that it just taught me a really good lesson. But we end the show here with a couple quick resources. What's one piece of technology or equipment that you couldn't live without?
GPS, Catapult GPS. I think it's just the most comprehensive deal. You can derive a lot of different things from it. The other tools are awesome, not must-haves, but they're awesome because we can drill down a little bit more. Between the Catapult GPS as a front runner, 1080 would be close behind.
Yeah, GPS or 1080 might almost be overtaken for me with the ability to do the return to play stuff. It's incredible things.
It's been a great thing, and we're just scratching the surface. I mean, we're learning stuff on a weekly basis. That's been really fun in that area.
When you look out 3 to 5 years from now, what's kind of one innovation that you think is going to happen? Where's your attention focused right now with the horizon of this profession?
That's a great question.
While you're thinking about it, I think my focus right now is like artificial intelligence, how to utilize that in an effective way as a strength coach, really pull that in. I think the mobility piece, I think those two areas are probably the biggest influence for me.
Yeah. I think along those lines, we've got an awesome data program in our undergrad here, and data analytics. And so a project that I started this summer is I brought a student over, and he's been working with me closely for the summer now into the fall. Just me dumping all of the data his way and seeing what he comes up with and sees trends wise and whatnot. Maybe in a lot more of the metrics than we're delivering on a daily basis. I just think those AMS systems and the different dashboards and stuff that you can create. I know UCLA is doing it. A couple other programs are doing it in different levels, but a flagging system, right? Like in a real-time flagging system. I think the time of getting this data, I'm doing this the best I can, and I'm not a computer expert by any means, but by the time I clean the data and I get those reports out, practice has been over for 2 hours. And that is me closing the door, throwing the headphones in, really getting after it.
Yeah.
And again, I'm probably in the middle of the pack to probably slower end of getting that over across the table. But to me, what system can you put in place? Is there a dashboard or technology that you can put in place that creates a flagging system really, really quickly, so that within hour of practice being over, I've got that hot list, but it's not just a GPS hot list. It's combining all of their metrics, their body weight, their fuel, their hydration, their sleep, right? Like everything into one, and being able to identify guys that might be creeping towards an injury.
Yeah.
Because that's where our success lies, right? Is the developmental piece in the off season, but their availability on Saturdays in the fall is the difference between wins and losses.
Yeah.
So we do as good of a job as we can, but there's always more meat on the bone. So I agree with you. I think some of those AI driven dashboards and things that are going to be able to alleviate a lot of the data cleanup and being able to consolidate all that stuff to an actionable piece is be where this thing is going.
Yeah, I agree with you. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show, man. It's obvious to me and everybody that you guys are doing some really.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Thanks
Appreciate
a lot,
you
man.
having me on.